Who was Joy Boy? Who is this individual whose name has echoed across the ages? What type of person was he and what were his ideals? And most importantly, what is it that drove him to create the One Piece? Well, to understand that, we first need to understand how the world was before he was born. And, as we talked about, we've seen that the world of One Piece has always been steeped in racism and discrimination. While racism is not inherently bound to one particular race, the sheer superiority in numbers of the humans resulted in them persecuting most of the other races. Most human societies would thrive on their own, driving other races away. Because of this, the other races sought remote locations to escape this discrimination. The fishfolk and merfolk went to live on the seafloor, the minks went to live on the back of a giant elephant, and the skyfolk went to live on the moon, and later on the Sky Islands. Those who remained on the blue sea, such as the Kuja, the Giants, or the Shandorians, had to become fierce warriors in order to keep intruders away. The races that couldn't adapt, like the dwarves, fell under the submission of humans. Humans had simply accepted this as their natural right. They were the ones in power, they were the ones who had the advantage in numbers, and because of that, the race became the normal. Humans were the de facto rulers of the world, they had a monopoly in it, and those oppressed had no other choice but to submit or fight to survive. And while it's important to understand that these different races were being discriminated against, this is something that did not apply to just them, but even humans themselves. Because even among humans, there existed a hierarchy. The powerful and rich, and the common folk, the poor. The common folk had no choice but to follow those above them, and even below them were those in even more miserable conditions. Slaves, deprived of any and all freedom, or the oppressed, ruled over by tyrants. Millions had to suffer and submit for the privilege of just a few select at the top. And because those at the top held the power, no one could change how the world worked. Freedom was nothing more than a dream. However, at one point, one boy arose to reject this very belief, and to challenge the whole world to a fight. The name of this boy has been lost to history, but there was another name he was known by, an epithet that encapsulated who this person was at their core, someone who was known as Joy Boy. But who was Joy Boy? For someone who is at the very center of all of these mysteries, he's rarely ever been mentioned, if at all. So for first step, let's gather together all that we know about him for a fact. Number 1, while the presence of a figure like Joy Boy was something that was hinted at across the entire series, the first time he was ever named was in a poneglyph found at Fishman Island, which is a written record of an apology by Joy Boy to the mermaid princess of the Void Century. There, he apologized for not being able to keep a certain promise that he made with the people of Fishman Island, seemingly involving the Noah Ark. Neptune claimed that keeping the Noah Ark safe was their duty to fulfill their part of the promise, keeping it intact until a certain day arrived. Otohime shed more light on this, explaining that one day a man would arise and guide this new mermaid princess to using her powers the right way, leading to a big change in the world. This was also mentioned by Oden, claiming that the borders of the Wano country had to open for when Joy Boy arrived. And more importantly, during his execution, he even implied that this man, supposedly Joy Boy, would travel across 800 years into the future. But this poses a very odd question. What did Oden mean by Joy Boy traveling across 800 years? Is he immortal? A time traveler? Someone sent by Toki? A spirit? Or something else? Well, that's a question we'll leave for later, because at present, I just want to focus on who Joy Boy was back in the day, and I want to focus on the biggest clue that we've gotten about him, the fact that Joy Boy was the one who left behind the One Piece. That is undeniably a massive revelation which completely recontextualized a lot of things, but truth be told, I had already long since realized that was likely the case by the time it was revealed in the manga, because I had realized exactly this. Joy Boy was undeniably a very important figure, perhaps the most important figure in the entirety of the Void Century, And I think in that regard, Joy Boy held one of the most important positions in the world. He was potentially the ruler, the king of the Great Kingdom. But to explain why I think that is the case, we need to first better understand what the Great Kingdom itself was. For being such an important faction in the story of the Void Century and the center of so many theories, much like Joy Boy, it's odd to think that the Great Kingdom has really only been properly mentioned and explained once. During Robin's flashback, Clover told the Gorosei that through the research of the poneglyph they had found and other documents that had survived the Great Purge, they discovered the existence of this Great Kingdom. Now, it is important to note that while this is the name commonly used by fans, it's not exactly the most accurate of translations. Great isn't really a title, but really just an adjective that Clover used to describe the kingdom, which is actually more translatable to immense, or in Japanese, kyodai na okoku. However, I will still be using Great Kingdom to refer to it, since it is the term that the fandom is most familiar with anyway. But yeah, in other words, Clover said that they found the existence of an immense kingdom. Immense implies a sense of size, scope, though it may not necessarily mean actual, tangible, physical size, such as living on a massive island. Rather, I think he meant that the kingdom was so immense because it wasn't limited by any natural borders. More on that later. The kingdom was furthermore said to boast mighty power, though it is never specified if this power was used for good or for evil. This indicates that either they had a lot of manpower as part of their immense influence, or perhaps it might have even been referring to the existence of the ancient weapons, which the Great Kingdom is implied to be connected to. As we know, the kingdom had an enemy, and this enemy was an alliance of different human kingdoms, who would later become the founders of the world government. And what Clover theorized is that the reason why the world government erased all information about the Great Kingdom is not because they feared the ancient weapons or because they feared the power of the kingdom, but because they feared its ideals. What frightened the government the most was not the power of the kingdom, but the ideals that said kingdom embodied. Or in other words, it's possible that the government feared Joy Boy's ideals. And it's these ideals that Joy Boy held so close to his heart that helped tie and connect everything together. Because what do you think were Joy Boy's ideals? Or in other words, what was Joy Boy's dream? Well, try to ask yourself this instead. If you had to put it in one word, what would you say is the biggest theme in all of One Piece? What single theme do you think perfectly encapsulates everything this story is about? What do you think is, at its core, the fundamental ideal that the characters of this tale pursue?
この海で一番自由なやつが海賊王だ。
Joy Boy's ideal, Joy Boy's dream, the one that the world government fears so much, was most likely an ideal of freedom. In his heart, what Joy Boy always desired was to be free, the freest man in the world. And I think that at first, Joy Boy was nothing more than just a young lad who set out to sea. A young kid from a small island who wanted to be free. And so the only way he could do that, the only way he could be free, was by becoming a pirate. I believe that Joy Boy became a pirate simply because it was the only way to be free. Much like in our world, which was incredibly oppressed at the time, pirates set out to sea for the purpose of living a free life. Oppression leads to a desire of freedom, which leads to a surge in pirates. And at its core, One Piece is a pirate story. If you think back on our own world's history, the reason why pirates emerged was for freedom. During a time where the common folk were oppressed by those in power and freedom was almost non-existent if you weren't on the privileged side, pirates sailed to sea to be free and not be bound by the dichotomy of society. Many of them might have been cruel and have caused many horrible actions, sure, something that we also see reflected in the world of One Piece. But among them, there were also others who had more noble ambitions. A defining trait of pirates in our world is that they broke through a lot of the social boundaries that divided humans. They saw people who had different skin colors as fellow humans, and shared their ideals of freedom with them by forming pirate crews of mixed races. Does that sound familiar? They broke through the idea of racism to bring everyone together, which is exactly what we see pirates and especially Joy Boy do in the world of One Piece. Joy Boy, much like all these pirates, left his hometown and set out to sea to pursue his dream of freedom. He traveled the world, visited so many islands, gathered a large crew, and met so many people. Joy Boy was not afraid of those who were different. He was a pirate, someone who shared that freedom with everybody, regardless of their race. He made friends with all types of people: fishmen, Shandians, minks, Kuja, giants, and all sorts of races. Joy Boy gathered a large crew, made many allies across the world, and eventually, at some point, grew so powerful that he established a kingdom of pirates. Much like how pirates in our world did the same, establishing pirate kingdoms like that of Tortuga or Libertalia, pirate kingdoms where pirates could live free, Joy Boy established his own pirate kingdom in this world. He founded a kingdom where people could be free, where they could be pirates like him and party together hand in hand. Joy Boy ruled not as a monarch, but as a friend. And this position perhaps might have been what led him to being called by his people as the Pirate King. And this kingdom was located none other than at the ends of the world, on an island that would one day come to be known as Laugh Tale. While it hasn't been confirmed officially yet, it's something that has been strongly implied across the series. After all, the 4 road poneglyphs lead to this location, and it would make sense that if Joy Boy left the One Piece anywhere, it would be at his home kingdom. But even more clear is the fact that the image that both Crocus and Inuarashi visualized of Laugh Tale is identical to the image of the Great Kingdom that Clover visualized. This island, this kingdom, was key to the Void Century. But this kingdom was not really a traditional kingdom. Sure, it had a home base island, that much is made clear, but I think the kingdom encapsulates not a territory, but its people, scattered all over the world. As Clover put it, the kingdom had become enormous, not because of a large territory, but because its people were scattered all over the world, as it included all the allies and friends Joy Boy had met on his journey. But I think what is most important to understand when it comes to Joy Boy's dream is that it's not something that he did for selfish reasons. Joy Boy did not become the ruler of the Great Kingdom because he craved power and control, or to rule over the world, but because he wanted to be free. And the only way he could be free was for everybody to be free. Joy Boy desired freedom not just for himself, but for everybody. Joy Boy wanted to bring freedom to those who had none, to those oppressed, to create a world where everyone was free, one where all could sail the seas in adventure without being shackled down by the restrictive mindset of society. After all, how can you be free if no one is free? True freedom isn't achieved by robbing it away from others, but by sharing it with everyone. Joy Boy wanted to turn the system, the entire world, upside down and finally bring freedom to everyone in the world. This meant putting a stop to slavery, to the social hierarchy, to the system those tyrannical humans' kingdoms had created, but most importantly, to put a stop to racism and discrimination. Joy Boy wanted freedom not just from slavery and social boundaries, but also freedom for those who were oppressed, freedom for those minorities who were persecuted and hunted down for centuries. Joy Boy wanted a world where everyone was truly equal, not just by demolishing the political constructs that oppressed others, but also by breaking down the racial barriers that had kept people divided. Joy Boy really wanted to unite everyone and unify the world as one piece. And it's the specific objective that really ties everything together. Because once you start to think about it, it's already been confirmed in so many ways that Joy Boy was someone who wanted to achieve equality for all the races of the world. We see this in the fact that so many of the poneglyphs of the Great Kingdom were mostly left to different races. The Shandians, the fishmen, the mink, etc. And particularly this bond between Joy Boy and other races is something we see so clearly in Joy Boy's relationship with the fishmen. He was an ally of the fishmen, but even more importantly, Joy Boy made a promise with them. The details of this promise have never been specified, but we can easily deduce what it really was, because the promise is something that involved the Noah Ark, and, well, put quite simply, what is the purpose of an ark? The purpose of an ark is to emigrate people, to help a very large number of people to emigrate and head somewhere else. What Joy Boy had promised to the fishmen was to transfer them to the surface. He promised he would change the world to a point where they could live in the surface alongside humans without fear of being persecuted. Joy Boy had the Noah built to help the entire population of Fishman Island emigrate to the surface. As the Sea Kings put it, It was likely that clan, the D clan, that built this ark in the first place. Mass immigration is not simple, especially through such a dangerous journey that we've been told many times is very difficult to undertake. But this ark would be big enough to ensure everyone would be safely transported to the surface. The ship was designed with enormous chains that sea kings could pull, the only realistic way in which a ship of this size could be carried, which would be done with the help of Poseidon's authority. So, working together, Joy Boy and Poseidon could help the fishmen move to the surface and help them live alongside humans. And this is something that is confirmed to us in a scene in chapter 621, where Neptune described that Otohime's dream is the same dream her ancestors had, shown over the backdrop of the Noah Ark. And as we know very well, Otohime's dream is to move the population of Fishman Island to the surface. For years, she worked hard to convince her subjects to move there, to trust humans, and have the courage to face them, to be able to coexist with them, that love could prevail over fear, and that there was a place for people to live together. Or, to put in her own words, what Otohime always sought after was the day where everyone could live under the same sun. Because it's that yearning for the sun that unites people together. Just like Otohime mentioned, the fishmen gathered at the roots of the sun tree Eve because it was the only place in the seafloor where they could get a taste of sunlight. But to them, sunlight just isn't enough. They know deep down in their hearts that they yearn to see the real sun. They want to live under the same sun as all the humans. And that is because the sun is a symbol of union. Scientifically speaking, the rays of the sun result in a chemical reaction that releases serotonin in our brains, bringing us joy, which is why the light of the sun have become symbols of joy and hope. It's why people consider sunny days to be good days and cloudy days to be bad days, because the sun, quite simply, scientifically, brings people joy. And that is precisely the type of joy and hope that Joy Boy wanted to bring, symbolized by the sun itself, a light that could bask and embrace all in the world, regardless of who they are, to bring them joy. That is why he came to be known exactly as just that, Joy Boy, the boy who brought joy. Hey, hello, this is Arthur from the future here, so allow me to interrupt this for just a second. So this episode was originally edited and finished all the way back in May of 2021, but since then Oda has introduced a story element that basically spoils just about everything I wanted to explain here, so wow, thanks Oda. Jokes aside, I'm talking of course about the sun god Nika, and given his importance, I thought I'd at least make a quick inclusion to talk about him in this episode. The figure of Nika in my eyes is undoubtedly that of Joy Boy. Just like Who's Who explained it, this legendary figure from ancient times is someone who symbolized the sun, being perceived by some as the god of the sun. Nika is someone who brought joy and laughter to slaves and those who were oppressed, something that is emphasized by his own name, likely Joy Boy's true name, either first or last name, being Nika, because Nika is one of the Japanese sound effects that can be used for laughter. And thus, much like the sun, Nika was someone who brought joy and laughter to everyone in the world. And of course, I'm sure I don't need to point out how it is that he did that, because a simple glance will make it clear that Nika looks like he's dancing and partying, being nearly identical to the figure of Luffy partying in Skypiea, just like we mentioned last episode. And just as legend says, the day Joy Boy reappears, he will deliver a party that will connect the entire world together, and through it, he will bring laughter and joy to everyone. The man who was just like the sun, someone whose shining light could bring joy to all he formed a bond with. This union of friendship, of nakama, that is the bond that Joy Boy formed with his crewmates, with his allies and with his friends, and the bond he wanted to form with everyone in the world, symbolized by the sun.
絵空に描く幻想よりも太陽へと続く道。
俺の仲間になれよ。
This is shown over an image of Otohime's grave and Joy Boy's Noah Ark, showing that all those years later, through Joy Boy and through Otohime, we're seeing once again a connection of friendship between different races being made to forge a path towards the sun that will unite everyone. This bond of friendship, this parted bond, is a bond of nakama, a special bond that ties people together, no matter the race, no matter who they are. And it's the symbol of the sun that ties together Joy Boy and his allies, not just symbolically, but as an actual symbol. For example, the fishmen have this fascination with the sun, and so the fishermen pirates would eventually use the mark of the sun to brand themselves. But not just that, the brand of the sun was used to raise the brand of the celestial dragons. They were quite literally replacing the symbol of the government with the symbol of the sun to indicate that they were free. And keep in mind, this is a mark that appeared as early as East Blue, meaning it's something that Oda likely had in mind ever since the very start. Similarly, the Kosuke clan, other allies of the Great Kingdom, also bear a small sun within their crest. The Minks also use that crest as a symbol given their ties with the Kosuke clan. The Shandians have also shown to have imagery of suns in their decorations as well. In fact, on Wiper's arm we can see the symbol of the sun tattooed on it. The flag of the Kuja, while a bit more of a stretch since it's meant to represent the head of a Gorgon, does also sort of look a bit like a sun. And while Elbaf does not have such a mark, they do have a festivity that celebrates the sun. In Big Mom's flashback, we learn of the solstice celebration, where the people of Elbaf fast for several days to celebrate, in their words, the rebirth of the sun. And did you notice something about all these different countries? All of them are from different races, from different minorities. These even included humans such as the Kosuke clan or Joy Boy himself, but the fishmen, the Minks, the Skyfolk, the Kuja, the Giants, almost all the oppressed races of the world were allied with Joy Boy because they all believed in the same objective, in the same sun that tied all of them together. Together they worked to change the world because they truly believed that the sun could prevail. And that is exactly what Joy Boy strived to do. That was his goal. That was what he put so much effort towards in order to unite the world. Joy Boy's dream was to be free. He wanted to be more free than any person in the world, and to achieve that, he became the Pirate King, the freest man in the seas. And as a king, he founded an immense kingdom of pirates, one that was not bound by territory or monarchical rules, but that united and connected people all across the world. But Joy Boy wanted freedom for more than just himself or his people. He wanted freedom for everyone in the world. He wanted to free those who were oppressed. He defeated many tyrannical rulers on his journey, but he didn't want to stop there. He wanted to free the entire world. Joy Boy wanted to quite literally change the world and usher in a new era that would change it. Across the series we hear this expression, the swell of an era, which is an expression that indicates a new era that will bring about change will come. And we are told time and time again that a new era is going to come. And that is exactly what Joy Boy wanted to do, to bring a new era that would change how the world worked. To bring everybody together, to live under the same sun, instead of fighting against each other, to party alongside them hand in hand. That was the goal that lied at the end of Joy Boy's dream, to unite the world through the sun, something that was symbolized by the sun itself. Joy Boy wanted to bring the rise of the sun to the whole world, to start a new era that would change things for everyone. And yet, we all know how things ended. Joy Boy was not able to bring this party to the whole world. The winners were the humans. They won the war, they defeated Joy Boy, and prevailed. They erased all traces that were made of him to make sure that his ideals would never be inherited. They doubled down on their oppression and made sure that no one could take power away from them. They founded a world government, an organization that held a stranglehold on the world, ensuring that no one could ever be free again and steal their privilege away from them. But even so, for as much as they attempted to wipe away any traces of Joy Boy, his will, his dream, and the era he sought to bring, these are things that will never cease to be.
受け継がれゆく意志、時代のうねり、人の夢。人々が自由の答えを求める限り、それらは決してとどまることはない。
Joy Boy knew, even if he was defeated, that one day someone would complete his dream, that someone would inherit his will and bring forth this destined era. He knew that even if the world government tried to purge the light, he knew that even if the sun would be engulfed by a long and dark night, that one day someone would appear that would bring an end to that night. Someone would make the sun rise once again, and it would be that sun that would bring joy and would bring everybody together. To usher in a new tomorrow where everyone could stand side by side, with no prejudice, no discrimination, but connected through a bond of brotherhood, of friendship, of nakama, and to do something as silly as throwing a massive party together, all united under the same sun. And it's that event, the rise of the sun after the long, long night, that would come to be known as the dawn of the world. And that is the reason why Joy Boy created and left behind the One Piece. But that is a story no one yet knows about.